Hey guys, so with the upcoming Reverb G2, I saw a lot of questions about the Windows Mixed Reality tracking, and I thought I'd just answer a few of those questions here today. So a lot of people concerned with the tracking quality. The videos from Mixed Reality TV that I saw, he did a lot of testing with occlusion, but he didn't really show off volume. So today I'm going to test occlusion, tracking volume, and tracking quality in Beat Saber at the end. And we'll start with volume here, because this is the one that people usually don't cover. So currently I'm using the Lenovo Explorer, and there's two cameras in the front. There's no side cameras like the G2. I'll flash a picture up of what my headset looks like. So basically, the test I have here, I have these two cameras and the representative of where the cameras are and where my eyes are. So I look through this, it's pretty much lined up right where my eyes are, but a bit out farther because that's where the cameras are. So when I mean volume, tracking volume, I mean the absolute tracking. So if I go out of the tracking volume, you can see that there's rotational, which is the gyro tracking, but there's no positional tracking. If I look up where my hand actually is, that's where it is. Now, you can move out of this, but you have to be constantly moving your controller for it to work. But I'm just gonna show what the camera range is, basically. So I pick this up and line it just perfectly up with my controller, as best as I can. And I'll go ahead and move my controllers out. All right, I'm gonna assume that I lost tracking, so I'm gonna drop the cameras. And you can see, yep, that's where my controller is. This is where it lost tracking. Now I'll go ahead and do vertical. So we'll start with going up. This one cuts out really early. That's where my hand was, that's where it got lost. So switch here. Right now we'll go down. All right, and I'm gonna let go. Yep, so that's where my hand was, that's where it got lost. So if you see here, this is basically the tracking volume of the two cameras on the front. And the two cameras on the front are the same on this headset as the G2. Now the G2 does have two cameras on the sides, which we can talk about, but with the two cameras on the front, it has basically 180 horizontal tracking, but the vertical tracking is only about 90 degrees, maybe a little less. Barely any on the top, but a lot on the bottom. And that's because you have your tool belts down here, so you can pick out of a tool belt and it works just fine. Now with the side cameras, they're actually positioned a bit higher up. So these cameras are angled down, but the side cameras are straight out. So you're actually gonna have a lot higher tracking on the sides. So basically one camera is about this much. So if we put it on the side, you're getting an extra tracking way more on the back. And then also you're gonna have a lot vertical tracking, a lot more vertical tracking. So the volume's gonna be greatly increased, so the overall tracking will be better on the G2. All right, so now for controller occlusion. So obviously, if you try really hard, not really that hard, you can occlude the bottom controller and make it lose tracking. You can do this really easily if you try, but when you're actually playing games, it usually doesn't happen. Very rarely, and you kind of develop a know-how of where to put your controller so you don't lose tracking. So the two-handed weapons in H3VR, you can see that even though I'm aiming down sights, the controllers, you're not going to lose tracking. Like this will be occluded, but you won't be occluded like this. And then that goes for pretty much every weapon, at least every weapon that I've tried. If I aim down sights, you're not going to get controller occlusion. Even with the SMG, because it positions your hands so much higher up on the front hand. And it still feels normal. It might look weird, but if you're actually doing it, it feels fine. The pistols in H3VR are only one-handed, but usually in all games, I hold my pistols like this. In Half-Life Alyx, it works like that. Pavlov, you can grip, and then your hand's stuck there, you can put it away. But basically, usually you just hold pistols like this, and then there's no issues. And it just works across all guns. Yeah, so in practice, usually you don't lose your tracking from occlusion. And if you do, you just kind of give your controller a little flick and then it works just fine. Yeah, just like that. All right, so now I'm gonna switch over to Beat Saber and I'm gonna go ahead and show and demonstrate the tracking quality compared to the index. All right, so we're here in VR and I'll show you that these are the Windows Mixed Reality controllers and the sabers are positioned weird. This is how I have it for my setup for my index controllers, but it still works for these controllers. I'll go ahead and put a picture up on the screen of my grip, and basically I'll just be rotating my wrist, going like that. So the tracking quality when it comes to Beat Saber, the main thing is it kind of jitters out. So there's absolute tracking, that's every time a frame is captured by the cameras, and it's the absolute position of the controllers. But in between those data points, it has to guess where it's going. So to demonstrate this, I'm gonna go ahead and swing my controller down right to the middle here really fast. You can see that it really freaks out and jitters before snapping back to place. And that's the estimation that's not quite right. And that's what you feel most in Beat Saber. And it gives you this feeling of, instead of swinging like a solid saber, it kind of feels a little floppy, like swinging a noodle. Not so much, but you probably can't tell. I can only tell because I go from this and then back to the index tracking. But if you were just jumping in, you wouldn't really notice and you could play. And the tracking's not gonna limit you. It's not gonna skill cap you until you're way up. And there's people that are much higher ranked than I am and playing harder songs with these Windows Mixed Reality controllers. And it can only get better on the G2. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself and hop into Zetsu here.